Do we really have the right to travel and are sovereign citizens full of shit? Part 2. I want to address this comment and build off my previous video because a lot of people got some things misconstrued. Now, this troll is saying that I'm proving myself wrong because I read something out of this book that I'm about to read you, and he specifically held on to the last part, unless by unquestionable authority of law. So allow me to break that part down. Here's what I read. No right is held more sacred or is more carefully guarded by the common law than the right of every individual to the possession and control of his own person, free from all restraint or interference of others, unless by clear or unquestionable authority of law. Now, here's what you need to understand. Everything in law must be qualified because law is very fucking specific. And everything in the public operates off assumptions, presumption, and color of law. So let's deal with the unquestionable authority. Book reference. Color of authority. That semblance or presumption of authority sustaining the acts of a public officer which is derived from his apparent title to the office or from a writ or other process in his hands apparently valid and regular. Color of law. The appearance or semblance without the substance of legal right. And all that simply means is that there's a presumption of authority that exists. And since we're indoctrinated into believing that government is above us, it's no wonder why some people don't question authority or law. Now, since the last video was on the topic of the right to travel, I kind of want to get back to that point. Now, when I read you this and break it down, I'm hoping some people have their common sense turned on. Book reference, Forbidden Civics. One of my favorite case citations that details such acquiescence and regulation of rights is in the Supreme Court case of Aptheker versus Secretary of State, in which the court stated, "Free movement by the citizen is of course as dangerous to a tyrant as free expression of ideas or the right of assembly, and it is therefore controlled in most countries in the interest of security." Now, whenever you start to talk about the right to travel, a lot of people are going to come back with this retort. Well, cars are inherently dangerous. Automobiles are just about inherently dangerous as an unloaded gun. But here's a side note. They've always encroached on the liberties of the people whenever there's a national emergency or security risk, which is why there's literally always a national emergency that's being declared by every president. And there are national emergencies from prior presidents that are still in effect today. So like with 9/11, they came out with the Patriot Act. And Ron Paul schooled everybody on how much freedoms that was actually encroaching upon. And even with COVID, Supreme Court came out and said that these mandates were unconstitutional. So I digress and let me reread that part again. Free movement by the citizen is of course as dangerous to a tyrant as free expression of ideas or the right of assembly, and it is therefore controlled in most countries in the interest of security. Now pay attention to this part. That is why riding boxcars carries extreme penalties in communist lands. That is why the ticketing of people and the use of identification papers are routine matters under totalitarian regimes, yet abhorred in the United States. Which is complete bullshit because let's talk about the application. Does the ticketing of people and asking the use of identification papers happen every day in the United States? i.e. license and registration? So even though the so-called Supreme Court said it's abhorrent in the United States, we can see from everyday life that this shit happens every day. So does that really mean the United States is actually a totalitarian state? Let's look it up. Now let's go to comparative analysis. The following comparative analysis shows the principal characteristics of the three forms of government. Autocracy. Authority is derived through heredity. People have no choice in the selection of their rulers and no voice in making the laws. Results in arbitrariness, tyranny, and oppression. Attitude towards property is feudalistic. Attitude towards law is that the will of the ruler shall control, regardless of reason or consequence. That's autocracy, and some of these characteristics is what we see in everyday life today. Let's look at democracy. A government of the masses. Authority derived through mass meeting or any other form of direct expression. Results in mobocracy. Attitude towards property is communistic, negating property rights. Attitude towards law is that the will of the majority shall regulate, whether it be based upon deliberation or governed by passion, prejudice, and impulse without restraint or regard to consequences. Here's the meat potatoes. Results in demagogism, license, agitation, discontent, and anarchy. License? You mean like driver's license? Fishing license? License to do business? But let's look up how the government was actually established and how it's supposed to run today. Republic. Authority is derived through the election by the people of public officials best fitted to represent them. Attitude towards property is respect for laws and individual rights and a sensible economic procedure. Attitude towards law is the administration of justice in accord with fixed principles and established evidence and with strict regard to consequences. A greater number of citizens and extent of territory may be brought within its compass. Avoids the dangerous extreme of either tyranny or mobocracy. Results in statesmanship, liberty, reason, justice, contentment, and progress. Is the standard form of government throughout the world. Now, I want to go back to attitude towards property is feudalistic when dealing with autocracies. Because let's look up the definition of feudal. Pertaining to feuds or fees, relating to or growing out of the feudal system or feudal law, having the quality of a feud as distinguished from allodial. And what is allodial? Allodial is defined as free, not holding of any lord or superior, owned without obligation of vassalage or fealty, the opposite of feudal. Now, did you know that modern property law is built off of feudalistic principles? Pay attention to this definition. Feudal law, the body of jurisprudence relating to feuds. The real property law of the feudal system. The law anciently regulating the property relations of lords and vassals. Today, that's landlord and tenant. And the creation, incidence, and transmission of feudal estates. Now, here's what the expert commentary says. Survivals of the feudal law to the present day so affect and color that branch of jurisprudence as to require a certain knowledge of the feudal law in order to the perfect comprehension of modern tenures and rules of real property law. And here's under the expert commentary under the definition of feudal system. It formed the entire basis of the real property law of England in the medieval times, and survivals of the system in modern days so modify and color that branch of jurisprudence both in England and America that many of its principles require for their complete understanding a knowledge of the feudal system. The feudal system originated in the relations of a military chieftain and his followers, or king and nobles, or lord and vassals, and especially their relations as determined by the bond established by a grant of land for the former to the latter. So this is why no one truly owns their property in so-called America. Because even when you pay off your mortgage, what do you have to pay? Property taxes. Who do you pay it to? The state. The state is acting as the lord of the land, or landlord. This is contrary to allodial principles. Book reference, Introduction to the Law of Real Property. It would be economical in terms of time and effort if we could begin the study of law of real property by proceeding directly to a consideration of that law as it is in our own day and place. Unfortunately, such a shortcut is not practical. A thorough understanding of the modern law is impossible without a knowledge of its historical background, which is based in feudal law or feudal tenures. And again, all that just came from the fact that we read that attitude towards property is feudalistic in an autocracy. So that means if the United States is implementing feudalistic principles, that means it has a mixed autocracy in its government. And license simply means permission or to do that which without such license would be deemed illegal. And whenever you hear the media use the term sovereign citizen, just know that that term is an oxymoron and it's used as propaganda. Propaganda floods our country from every conceivable source. Active and vociferous agencies have been organized for the express purpose of advancing doctrines absolutely not in accord with the fixed principles of our nation. In the most persistent manner, they seek to tear down rather than build, to destroy rather than improve. One of their most subtly dangerous features is that it is so camouflaged as to make it appear to have an innocent purpose. So when they say these so-called sovereign citizens don't follow the law, that's bullshit. Again, we know sovereign citizen is an oxymoron, a term created by the FBI, so don't get on me in the comments. And here's the last thing I'm going to read from this book, because this is the key issue, which is the ignorance among the people. Ignorance of citizens. Webster said, on the diffusion of education among the people rests the preservation and perpetuity of our free institutions. One of the foundation stones of representative government is education. And we know most people today don't know the federal constitution or their state constitution. An intelligent and informed citizen is an asset to the nation. So think about how many liabilities we actually have. Knowledge concerning the Constitution. For a proper appreciation of our government, the citizen should know what the Constitution is and what it contains. And the right to travel is a fundamental and natural law endowed to us by our Creator and not by any government. So you don't need a license to do what God gave you the right to do. Licenses are for commercial purposes only, and anybody telling you different is simply lying to you. So if you like this video, smash that like button, share it out, and follow me for more content on these type of subjects. Peace.